Arthur Simpson-Kent murdered his partner, who was a former Eastenders actress called Cyan Blake, and she was 43, and he also killed their two sons, Zachary, aged 8, and Amon, aged 4. He did so by beating and stabbing all three of them at their home in Erith in London in December 2015. Police believe that Simpson-Kent committed the murders because Cyan was planning to leave him. He buried the bodies of the three victims in the garden and then ran away to Ghana, but he was later caught and brought back to the UK. He got his whole life order in October 2016. Now viewer, if I've got you hooked on the story so far, do subscribe, give the video a like, drop a comment when you're ready and donate. Hit the thanks button below, I'll appreciate you. Wilbert Anthony Dyce got away with the murders of a mother and her two children for nearly 3 decades. Dyce was 26 when he raped and stabbed Norma Richards, 27, to death after following her home from a nightclub on the 17th of July 1982. He then stabbed her 9-year-old daughter Samantha to death and drowned 7-year-old Siretta in the bath at their flat at 54 Kingsgate Estate, Dalston, East London. Dyce, whose own mother lived just a few hundred yards away, left the scene after daubing the NF for National Front symbol on the walls in an attempt to make the murder look like a racist murder. The bodies of all 3 victims were found 2 days later on July the 19th by their grandmother Myra and by the stepsister of the 2 girls, Rodine. The murder weapon may have been a 19th century bayonet, which was kept in the flat as an ornament. Nobody suspected Dyce's involvement, his name was never given to the police, and he was never interviewed. It was only during a review in 2009, which was sparked by a query from a journalist researching a book about the footballer Laurie Cunningham, the brother of Norma's partner, that his DNA was matched to semen samples that were found at the scene. Confronted with this damning evidence, Dyce claimed that he had had sex with Norma Richards in the toilet of a nearby club hours before her death. He was convicted, however, of all 3 murders on the 17th of December 2010 after a trial at the Old Bailey. The court heard that he had also sexually attacked 2 other women in their own homes and stabbed his ex-wife. At the age of 54, Dyce was jailed for life with a whole life order. Now we've got the joint case of Kenneth Regan and William Horncy. In 2003 in London, 5 members of an Indian family were kidnapped and murdered by a criminal gang. The millionaire businessman Amarjit Chauhan disappeared along with his wife, his 2 baby sons and his mother-in-law. The bodies were initially buried in Devon before they were later dumped in the sea off Poole in Dorset, where 3 of them were eventually discovered in the English Channel. The bodies of the 2 little boys were never found. Kenneth Regan and William Horncy were given whole life orders for the 5 murders. Peter Rees was convicted of one of the murders. The motive was financial, as they planned to take over Amarjit Chauhan's freight company, which they then wanted to use as a front for importing drugs. The case was highly publicised due to the sheer brutality of the crime, and the trial was the longest in the history of the Metropolitan Police. Overnight, on the 6th to the 7th of August 1985, near the village of Tolshunt Darcy in Essex, South East England, Neville and June Bamber, both 61, their adopted daughter Sheila Cathell, 28, and Sheila's 6-year-old twin sons, Daniel and Nicholas Cathell, were all shot dead in their home, White House Farm. The only member of the immediate family to survive the night was the adopted son, Jeremy Bamber, who was then aged 24 and who, luckily for him, had been at his own home in the nearby village of Goldfinger when the mass murder took place. The police were first alerted to a disturbance at White House Farm when, at 3 a.m. on the 7th of August, Jeremy himself called them, claiming to have just received a distressing call from his father, telling him that his sister had gone berserk and that she had a gun.
My father's phoned from White House Farm and he sounded really frightened. He says, my sister's gone crazy and she's got a gun.
Jeremy added that after he himself heard a shot being fired, the line had gone dead. In his call to the police, Jeremy referred to his sister as a nutter. This was a reference to the lady's recent diagnosis of schizophrenia. Initially, the police wrote this devastating set of murders up as murder-suicide, in line then with what Bamber had told them. When they went to investigate, you see, they found the body of Sheila Cathell with blood oozing from her throat and with the semi-automatic rifle belonging to Neville, with which all the murders had been perpetrated, lying so as to be pointing towards Sheila's throat. One of Jeremy's cousins, however, whose name is Anne Eaton, discovered 3 days after the killings that the silencer to the murder weapon was in a cupboard in the home instead of being on the rifle, which is where it had always been kept. It seemed very unlikely to Anne and to other members of the family that Sheila would have murdered everyone with the silencer on the rifle and then thoughtfully gone and put the silencer away before shooting herself. They also estimated that keeping the silencer on the rifle would have made the rifle too long for Sheila to reach the trigger in order to shoot herself in the face. It also emerged that Sheila had not one bullet wound to the face, but 2, which, as you can see, makes it even less likely that she shot herself. It's also hard to believe, I'd say, that instead of calling the police or trying to save either his family or himself when his daughter started shooting everyone, Neville Bamber chose to call his son instead. How could he have done any such thing with bullet after bullet flying around his head, for instance? Jeremy Bamber murdered his entire immediate family for the substantial inheritance that he stood to gain after doing so. Straight after the funerals, which took place a few days after the killings, the young man not only went on a windsurfing holiday with his girlfriend, Julie Mugford, but also did lots and lots of partying besides that. That doesn't sound like grief or sadness to me. It was Julie's very report to the police some weeks later, when she and Jeremy had split up, of Jeremy's year-long plan to do away with his whole family and frame his sister, that triggered a renewed police probe into the massacre, which led, in October 1986, to Jeremy's conviction for the killings and to the whole life prison sentence for the perpetrator that came with that. For committing 3 murders plus several rapes of a young woman in a single sitting, Arthur Hutchinson, who was born in Hartlepool in February 1941, has been locked up since 1983. One of 6 children, having stabbed one of his sisters at the age of 7 and then being brought before a juvenile court at 11 on a charge of indecent assault, Hutchinson then spent much of his teens committing petty theft and having sex with underage girls. His other hobbies included walking round with a 5-foot stick and threatening people that he would kill them with but a single blow from it. During his 3-year marriage to his neighbour, Margaret Dover, the perpetrator having got married at 18, he openly slept around, and then during his second marriage, which came in 1969, he did exactly the same. Between his 2 marriages, the man spent some time in prison for having sex with underage girls. From 1971 until no later than 1983, Hutchinson was in and out of prison, his offences including SA, firearms offences and the attempted murder of his half-brother Dino. On the morning of the 28th of September 1983, after being arrested on suspicion of theft, burglary and rape, Hutchinson arrived at Selby Police Station in Yorkshire. After tricking police officers into removing his handcuffs so that he could go to the toilet, he made a dastardly escape by jumping through a closed window. Landing on a barbed wire fence as he did only added to the injuries that he sustained from the window's broken glass, and when, on the 22nd of October 1983, he sighted in the garden of a home in Dore, South Yorkshire, a large marquee, he still had a serious injury to one of his knees in particular. The marquee was where 59-year-old Basil Leitner, his 55-year-old wife Avril, their 28-year-old son Richard and their 18-year-old daughter Nicola had, earlier that day, held the wedding party of the couple's other daughter, Suzanne. After entering the marquee in search of food, Hutchinson broke into Richard's bedroom and stabbed him to death. When the perpetrator was confronted by Richard's father, Basil, at the top of the stairs, he stabbed him as well, the man ending up at the bottom of the stairs after falling backwards. He then stabbed Richard's mother, Avril, to death in the downstairs bedroom before going back upstairs and raping Nicola at knife point, first in her room, then out in the marquee, and then back in her room. To get Nicola from her room to the marquee and back again, the perpetrator had walked her past the dead bodies of her mother, father and brother. After being caught on the 5th of November 1983, shockingly, the perpetrator was only sentenced at the conclusion of his trial in September 1984 to 18 years. Thankfully, the Home Secretary of the time, Leon Britton, subsequently upgraded the sentence to a whole life term, and the animal's many appeals against the tariff have failed. Hell will be too good for that fucker. Damien Bendall committed his horrendous acts under the influence of drugs. He murdered, first of all, his girlfriend, who was pregnant with his child. Then he murdered her 2 young children. And then he murdered the school friend of one of the children who was staying over. This all took place in the Derbyshire town of Killamarsh in September 2021. He also confessed to the rape of one of the children, a little girl.
I don't know what happened.
Come to me. Mate, have you got anything on you that you shouldn't have?
No, there's no weapons or nothing.
Right,
do you just want to undo your coat? Have you armed yourself?
Yeah.
You have?
Have you stabbed yourself, mate?
I can see blood on your hands.
Yeah.
Anywhere else?
Just my chest, 4 inches in with a bread knife.
Can we have a look?
And one on the stomach. I bled quite.
Right, do you want to
take
yes.
Can we go down
No, just stay there.
I just don't want to be in front of everyone.
Alright, just go on the corner.
Just walking wounded at the minute.
Alright, stand here. Stay here.
Right,
So
we're told, I know what's going to happen to you now, mate.
Well, I know it's going to happen
We just-
when we go to prison, obviously, but again.
Why, what have you done? Have you done something to anyone else?
Yeah,
What have you done?
I've murdered 4 people.
07:47 hours. I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder. You don't have to say anything, but it may harm your defence. Do not mention when questioned something later rely on in court. Anything you do say may be given in evidence. Your arrest is necessary to protect you from harm, to prevent your disappearance, for a prompt and effective investigation. Okay? I'm going to get you up, we're going to put you in the back of the van.
Recently, he's been involved in some kind of violence at the prison that he is being held in. It was over some workshop equipment, some, really harmful equipment, and he attacked someone with it. When I heard about that on TikTok, I looked at the comments of the TikTok and everyone was saying the same thing. Why are you letting somebody who killed 4 people, including 3 children, anywhere near workshop tools that can cause harm or death to others? Bendall got his whole life order in 2022. When Rashan Arshad murdered his wife and their 3 children in a so-called honour killing, he felt, quote, totally justified in what he did, unquote. That quotation comes from the police who were involved in the case. A 36-year-old taxi driver, Arshad beat his wife and 3 children to death with a rounder's bat at their home in Cheadle-Hulme, Manchester in July 2006. This then is how Uzma Rayhan, 32, Adam, 11, Abbas, 8 and Henna, 6 all lost their lives. According to investigating officers, Arshad felt his wife had brought the killing on herself by having an affair. This adulterous behaviour of Uzma's shamed the whole family, meaning that they all had to die, except the husband. If you're thinking that, at the very least, the 3 children, who were wholly innocent for crying out loud, should have been spared, sometime after getting caught, Arshad expressed regret for killing them. He got his whole life order in 2007. 3.3 million quid. That's the estimated amount that triple murderer and triple whole life order prisoner, 26-year-old Kyle Clifford, is expected to cost the taxpayer over the next 60 years. At the time of this recording, this makes the most expensive prisoner in the UK. Clifford's failed suicide attempt, which he made just moments before his arrest in July 2024 for the murder of his ex-girlfriend, her mother and her sister, and which left him paralysed from the chest down, means for a start that in prison, where he will be for the rest of his up life, he will need a specially adapted cell to accommodate his wheelchair. There will be the cost of the employees that will be taking him to the toilet and washing him, the cost of the nurses, the doctors, the physiotherapists and the occupational therapists that he will need as well. As regards nurses, they will probably be the ones to be taking the killer from day to day for a shit and scrubbing him clean. Instead of costing the taxpayer the already pretty shocking £55,000 a year that the average prisoner costs, Clifford, who caused his physical disability, as I say, by shooting himself with the same crossbow that he used to commit 2 of his 3 brutal murders, is set to cost at least twice that. Clifford committed his triple murder on the 9th of July 2024. But before he perpetrated those 3 killings, he already had murder in his family. In 2017, Bradley Clifford, Kyle Clifford's brother, who was then aged 23, punched as many as 9 times a young man who, having just been sent flying from the pillion seat of a motorbike, which had just been deliberately hit by a car, was lying on the road with catastrophic injuries. As he savagely pounded the youth with his fists, Bradley Clifford raged at the man that he deserved the beating. The attacker was subsequently sentenced to 23 years for murder, 18-year-old Sobhan Khan having later succumbed to his many serious injuries, his motorbike catastrophe, like his beating, having come from Bradley Clifford. To the perpetrator, you see, for breaking the wing mirror of his beloved red Ford Mustang, Mr. Khan had to die. That was his reason for ending the young man's life. You might be inclined to forgive the addiction to videos showing extreme violence that Kyle Clifford developed when he became a trooper in the Queen's Dragon Guards, his very willingness to lay down his life for his country being the reason for your said inclination for forgiveness. Entering into military service is what Kyle Clifford did shortly after his brother's incarceration, and you may be as surprised as I was to learn that having such a close connection to a murderer was no barrier to joining the army. Things may or may not have since changed. Likewise, given the man's willingness to make the ultimate sacrifice for his country, we may well choose to overlook the fact that none of his fellow soldiers liked him. Or we could discover the truth to the man's army career and understand what a sham it actually was.
You have been referred to at times as a former soldier. In many cases that would serve as significant mitigation. Not so in your case, however, as your 2 years in the army included 286 days at home claiming to be ill. You never saw active service, and your utility to the armed forces can be gleaned in a parting comment from your commanding officer that, quote, his character is wholly unsuited to military employment, and he has no care nor concern beyond himself.
In June 2024, after an 18-month relationship with Clifford, in which the man had quickly revealed himself as a bully, a racist, a misogynist and a serial cheat, Louise Hunt, a 25-year-old owner of a dog grooming business and daughter of BBC racing commentator John Hunt, dumped the man. This would have come as a huge relief to Louise's family, who had noticed very early on Clifford's controlling and unreasonable behaviour towards Louise, as well as his rudeness and his arrogance. While Louise and her family were aware from the off of the murder conviction of Clifford's brother, it never crossed their mind for a minute that, as a result of being dumped by Louise, Clifford would arm himself with a crossbow and a kitchen knife and then drive to the Hunt home in Bushey, southeast England, ensure that his ex-girlfriend's father was out because he would never have let Clifford in, and then trick Louise's mother into letting him in, enabling him to unalive her, her daughter Louise and her daughter Hannah, aged 28. This is precisely what unravelled on the afternoon of the 9th of July 2024, Clifford having told Louise's mother, Carol, when she answered the door to him, that he just wanted to return some of Louise's belongings and that he was grateful to have ever been accepted into their family. Seconds after Carol let him in, she was lying on the floor, dying from the many stab wounds that Clifford had inflicted on her with the kitchen knife that he had brought with him. Clifford's subsequent grape, of Louise was his way of hurting and dominating her before unaliving her, which he did with his crossbow after keeping her tied up with duct tape for around 2 hours, just as her sister was approaching the house. In court, the judge observed that Louise would most probably have come to realise before she was unalived that Clifford had already unalived her mother, Louise having been working from a building out in the garden when that unaliving took place, and having been, as such, wholly oblivious to it. When, at around 6:54 p.m. that evening, Clifford left the house, Hannah Hunt, who Clifford had just fatally shot with his crossbow, was able to call the emergency services. On arriving, however, they found Hannah unconscious and were sadly unable to revive her. The following day, after a 22-hour manhunt, Clifford was located at a cemetery in the Lavender Gardens area of Enfield, North London. As officers approached the spot in the undergrowth where he was hiding, the man shot himself in the chest with his crossbow. This severed his vital spinal tendons, leaving him paralysed from the chest down. The aim of his act, though, was of course to end his life. However, as we can see, for all the perpetrator's skill at unaliving 3 defenceless and wholly innocent women with total savagery, when it came to unaliving himself, the fucker was totally fucking inept. During his 10-week hospital stay, the man required a 24-hour police guard. While he lay in hospital, the only comments he made were "sorry" and "what I have done is atrocious." For all this apparent remorse, however, when he was finally fit to give an interview, he went no comment all the way through.
Do you accept, Kyle, that based on the evidence that this is a premeditated murder of 3 people?
No comment.
Do you accept that you have meticulously planned this murder from the moment that you split up Louise?
No comment.
From the moment that she sent you that text message at the end of June, you began to plan her murder? Yes?
No comment.
At the last minute, Clifford changed his plea from not guilty to guilty as charged. Normally, pleading guilty gets a defendant a shorter sentence than the one that they would have got if they'd gone to trial and been found guilty. Clifford got 3 whole life orders, the judge duly condemning the man as a savage, self-entitled dick.
The evidence I have heard shows you to be a jealous man, soaked in self-pity, a man who holds women in utter contempt. This is no occasion to subject the family and friends of your victims to any delay or suspense. I therefore make clear at once that for each of these 3 murders, the sentence will be one of life imprisonment with a whole life order. That means a sentence from which you will never be released.
His sentencing took place in March 2025. From being a family of 5, the Hunt family is now reduced to a father and a daughter only, there being, as you can see, a 3rd daughter. These are the words of the father, John, in his victim impact statement.
When I was first invited to provide a victim impact statement, I initially misunderstood its purpose. Do I really need to detail the impact of having 3/4 of my family murdered? He went on, whatever sentence you're about to receive, whatever misery lies ahead for you in the next 60 years, remember that after your days on earth are done, on your dying day there will be no release for you, Kyle. The screams of hell, Kyle, I can hear them faintly now. They're going to roll the red carpet out for you.
Kyle Clifford became a triple murderer just because he got dumped. If this video has gripped you, I recommend you to watch this one next. I'll meet you there.